So I'm working on the 99 Nissan Maxima. I'm going to be removing the upper intake and the valve covers in order to replace the valve covers. And I'm also going to replace the spark plugs and and test the coils. And I'll probably also remove the starter and either replace it or repair it. There's something wrong with the solenoid in the starter. So what I'm going to start, I started with removing the hood struts, and I used a rope to pull the hood up to nearly vertical, and that allows me to have a lot more clearance around the engine and be able to see a lot better. So in this case, I just have a rope that's tied, it hooks in at the hood there, and it's tied around to the back of the car at the tow hook. But you could tie it in anywhere, really. And I've just removed these hood struts to allow the car to go up. I'll be replacing these at some point. As you can see, they're just not effective at all. And so I'm going to be removing the battery and the air box, disconnecting the wiring, the hoses, and to get ready to get into this project here. So you can see from this angle, once the intake is removed, you can see back in there where the oil is on top of the head, and it's dripping down onto the heat shield and accumulating there on the bolt there. And you can see it running. It's running all down through there, and it's heats up and smokes. So we'll get rid of that, and I'll try to degrease the engine as much as I can to get that off of there before I install the new gaskets. You can see it's wet with oil. So with the upper intake removed, I want to take an opportunity to show you some of the bolts that are concealed that you have to remove to get the upper intake off. One of them attaches here at this bracket. Then there's another bracket here. These are both 12 millimeters. And then the EGR has two 12 millimeter bolts here. And they have different washers on them than the other one. I'll show you that. And what I ended up doing is just cutting that coolant hose that goes to the EGR, and I'll just replace it with a new rubber hose. And I'll show you over here on the intake. This is looking at it. Flip it around a little bit here. This is the back side of it. You can't really see this. This is the bottom. But these are the two bolts that bolt to the brackets. And this is where the EGR bolts, and you can see this coolant hose goes in and out, and that's where I've cut it, and I'll just replace it. I just really couldn't get to those clamps to remove it. And I felt like even if I did, the hose would probably still be stuck on there pretty good. And it looks like it just passes through here and heats up this EGR a little bit. And you can see the bolts here are very heavy flange bolts, I guess, to spread the load and clamp it down. And you can see there's some corrosion here on the coolant lines. I guess the coolant hadn't been changed in a while. This is the upper intake gasket. It's still pliable, but I will replace it with a new one. And I may clean out that EGR. So now I'm just going to go through and start disconnecting things. I want to get this wiring harness off at the top of the engine. First thing I'm going to do is remove these cables. They just have a little, you open the throttle all the way and you can slide this lug out. It's just like on a motorcycle cable or a bicycle cable. There's one for the cruise, and this one here is for the actual throttle. It has a little tab that limits it from popping out. There we go. Got the cables disconnected. So I've got a few more vacuum hoses and coolant lines up underneath this manifold to get to remove before I can remove the 4 bolts and take the upper manifold off. They're a little difficult to show on camera, but I'll show you them when I get this disconnected and you can see from underneath. They're a little hard to even see, let alone try to deal with videoing while you're doing it. Well, I got the intake off. There were a couple hidden bolts. There were 2 here for the bracket, 12 millimeter. And then there's 2 here for the EGR tube that you couldn't really see but could feel. And another tricky one is this coolant hose that pipes around to the back side. I ended up just cutting that hose and I'll splice it back with another new hose. The hose probably needs replacing anyway. And ended up cutting it. This hose here, another coolant hose. I just couldn't get the fitting to come free. So the hoses I cut, I'll just replace with rubber hoses. And so the next thing I'm going to be doing is removing the valve cover gasket and replacing that.